Hello friends, welcome back. In last session, we have learned about the ownership concept in Rust. In today's session, we are going to learn about references and borrowing in Rust. References and borrowing is the same. You are borrowing the value as a reference from the owner. So that is reference. Reference can be mutable or immutable. Let's try it out. So let x equals to 5 and let borrow the value. To borrow the value, what is the method? Method is you just assign the owner with the m%. So as soon as you will assign m%, it will create a reference y to the value of original variable. Y is a reference to x. So we are borrowing the value from x to y. Now let's print it. The value of x equals to this and reference y equals to this. Let's run the program and check if we are able to borrow the value or not. Only concept you need to remember is that immutable you can have multiple references. So if I will do something like this, let z equals to x, z is also a reference to x. Now print ln, the value of x is this and the reference z equals to this. So it should be same, correct? The value of x is 5, y is 5, z is also 5. So if I am saying that x can be mutable, so how to make it mutable? Let's create a mutable reference. Let w a mutable reference. This will not work because x is not mutable. So what we need to do is we need to make it mutable. Will this work now? W is a mutable reference to x. So we are not printing the w, still it is not working because you cannot have two mutable references in the same scope. So how it can work? So if I remove it from here and then try to print it here, print the value of x this and the value of w is this. Will this work? Let's try it out. This is also not working because here we have two mutable references, one is x, one is w. So what we need to do is we need to remove x and the mutable reference value, the value of mutable reference w equals to this, and this time it should work, correct? So that is how you can create the references. The mutable reference w is working, although it looks nasty, but that is how Rust behave with the scope and the ownership. So here we have immutable, here we have mutable. If it is mutable, let's try to change the value. So the value, let's dereference w and increment x by 1. So we are changing the value of w, incrementing x by 1 because w is a reference to x. Now let's try and print the value. Value of w is w after increment. Let's run the program and check it out. Yes, it is working. But why it is working? Because x, y and z scope is here. Compiler knows that after this point x is not being used, that's why it is allowing this statement, and you can have another mutable reference by which you can change the value of x. So to prove that, let's try to print x after this line. Print the value of x is this, sorry, not about x. So if I try to print y, so if I will try to print y, so now I am changing the scope of y and trying to access the y after a mutable reference. Then it should give an error that mutable borrow occurs here. So mutable borrow, we have a mutable borrow here. That's why it is not allowed after this borrow. So you are referring to the previous borrow after a mutable borrow, that is not allowed in the Rust. So let's remove it. Although what you can do is, let's try if I will do, I am saying you cannot have multiple reference as mutable, but what if I will do something like this? Let's create a block and let a equals to x, and I want it mutable, mute, and try to mutate the value using a, right? Let's check first if it is working. It is not working because we are borrowing the x over here. So let's remove this and try it out, because x is shared between two scopes. So I have changed this, and let a modify the value of x. Now what will happen? Let's check it out. It is working. The value of a is 7. The value of x is mutated to 6 over here from 5. Now we have changed the value. Now if I want to print x, suppose print x, the value of x after increment, this here we have changed the value, but we were trying to print this x now, and it is also referring the x, so it should logically it should print 7. X has been incremented inside this block, which is allowed. So it is all about scope and ownership. After that, a is not there, although you are able to borrow the reference and mutate the value of x over here, and over here also you are able to mutate the value of x with the mutable reference. It is allowed only if the scope is different. In the same scope, it is not allowed. Correct? One more important thing. What will happen if I try to print w and x together? This w and the x cannot be accessed in the same line, in the same scope. So let's try it out, and w equals to this, x equals to this. Let's try to print the w and check if it works. It is not working. It is working over here, but it is not working together with the x. That is because of the scope. Rust compiler understands the scope line by line, and it decides that if something has been used and not referred later, that means scope is complete. After that, you will be able to use the second reference. If I will do like this, let's run the program and see, it is not working. Why it is not working? Because x's and w are both are borrowed. So w is referred here also, w is referred here also, and x is referred in between. So what will happen if I will remove this now? So let's try it out and check if it is working. Still it is not working, because you are trying to mutate over here, and w is also mutable. So you have w inside this scope also, right? Because it is not ended here, it is ended here. W is accessed after this scope also. That means W is shared in this scope. Although if you will not access this, then there is no problem, because W is not accessed inside this scope or after that. That means the scope of W is complete over here. Correct? Let's try it out also, and it is working. Correct? So these are few things you need to remember about the scope, and when you are creating a reference or borrowing the value from the owner, then you must remember the sequence and the scope of the particular variable. So important point to remember, at any given time you can have either one mutable reference or any number of immutable references. Reference must always be valid. So that these are the two things you need to remember in the session of reference and borrowing. I hope you understand the concept. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.